What is going on, people? It is your boy Temp, and I am here with a brand new video. I am here to talk about this camera right here, which is the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro, which is a title that I'm not going to say again. I'm going to refer to it as the 6K Pro for the rest of the video, because that is a weird, long title. Anyway, I've had this camera for about a year now, and I've put it through its paces. I've shot commercials with it from low budget to higher budget. I've shot a bunch of event footage with this. I've shot interview stuff. I've shot product videos. I've shot pretty much everything you could imagine. So I'm gonna talk about the things that I like about it, the things that I don't like about it, and just kind of give you like my overall experience over the past year using this camera. So if you enjoy content like this, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff, whatever it is. Help the algorithm, help your boy out, and I greatly appreciate it. Let's talk about why I got this camera in the first place. So before this camera, I was shooting on a Canon M50, which is a pretty good starter camera, but I wanted something that was going to give me a bit more oomph, I guess, let's say. I wanted to get a camera that was a lot more flexible, something that gave me better codecs, better resolutions, something that just had a better quality overall, and I feel like the Blackmagic definitely delivered on that. The image quality on this camera is amazing. It just has this very nice and soft cinematic look to it, which is great for some applications. There are certain situations that I've learned that this camera doesn't perform well in. One, I kind of knew that going into it, was low light. This is not a low light camera. This camera loves to be fed lights. Even with the dual native ISO, I find that the 3200 ISO is a bit too noisy for my liking. So I try and stay in the 400 to 1000 range. Sometimes I'll go up to like 1250, 1600 or whatever. Sony is definitely killing it when it comes to low light, and I wish that Blackmagic had a bit better low light, but you know, it is what it is. As long as you feed the camera what it wants, then it looks amazing. Secondly, there's this weird thing that happens in the highlights. I don't really like how this camera renders highlights in certain situations. Like if you're in a very controlled environment and you can like kind of tune everything the way that you want to, it's legit like one of the best at it. But if you're in the elements, if you're outside and you have situations that have a lot of contrast, where you have a lot of shadows and a lot of highlights, I think that this camera doesn't perform as well as it could. It does have 13 stops of dynamic range, but depending on where you have your ISO, it allocates it to either the shadows or the highlights. So even when I put my ISO at a place where it has just as much highlight detail as shadow detail, sometimes the highlights just don't look right to me. Like, I don't know what it is about the highlights. They don't look nice. They don't look pleasing. The colors don't really work well whenever you start color grading it. And it's only for certain situations. So it's like sometimes when you're shooting against like white or gray or tan walls, sometimes the colors just don't really sit right. I think if it had like 15 stops of dynamic range, it'll be able to render those highlights a bit better. Now, let's talk form factor, because that is the one thing. The biggest downfall of this camera is just the size and just the ergonomics. This is a very weirdly shaped camera. It's wide. This thing has hips on it. It is so awkward to like put on gimbals. Even sometimes it's awkward to like rig it up. It's just like, I don't like this form factor at all. This is the biggest downfall of this camera. It's just that it's just really weird. I did just buy the RS3 Pro though. It's coming in next week, so hopefully that'll make it a lot easier to rig. But as of right now, I don't know why they designed the camera this way. It's just so weird and bulky. And it's definitely a heavy camera too, despite the fact that it's plastic. Once you rig this thing up, it gets very, very heavy. So if you're doing like events with this camera, it is not the easiest camera to shoot an event with. It's not the easiest camera to shoot run and gun stuff with. This is like my run and gun setup. This is kind of where I keep my camera for most of my shoots. Very simple. I'll put a lens on it, put this Anton Bauer battery and a top handle, and I'm good to go. All right, let's talk autofocus, because when I first bought this camera, I was very concerned because it did not have autofocus. Now, over the past year, has that been a problem? Yes and no. I've definitely gotten a lot better when it comes to pulling focus. I'm not amazing at it, but I've gotten a lot better at it. And I feel like that's an important skill, especially if you want to like do a lot more camera work, like professional camera work. Like focus pulling is part of the job. So you have access to a lot more gigs if you're really good at focus pulling. But there are just some situations where I wish that I had autofocus. I just wanted to just lock in on what I wanted to lock in. I don't want to have to figure it out. Now, do I think that's a negative? I don't think it's as as big of a negative as it could be. I do think it has improved my game a lot because it does not have autofocus, so I have to really do it myself all the time. And it's just like whenever you nail focus, you just feel really good about it. Okay, let's talk about some of the features that this camera has. So this camera has multiple ways of capturing footage. So you can use an SD card, which I don't really recommend. I only really use SD cards for when I'm loading LUTs. You can use a solid state drive with this USB-C port, which I was using for a little while. It's definitely the cheaper of the options, at least the cheaper of the viable options. You know, a T5 is only gonna run you like $120 for like a terabyte, which is a lot of storage. It worked for a little while, but after a certain point, I kind of got, you know, tired of having an extra cable hanging off of my rig, because there are a lot of times where if I bump the camera or if I bump the cable, the drive would disconnect and I would have to wait for it to connect again. And sometimes I would have to unplug it and plug it back in for it to recognize. And sometimes I would actually miss shots because I was waiting for the camera to recognize the hard drive. So now I have evolved to CFast cards, which is definitely the more expensive of the options. Like this 1 terabyte Angelbird CFast card cost me $700. $700 for this. I have 2 SD cards, so this is the more expensive one. I use this for my 6K Pro. And on the 4K that I'm filming on right now, I'm actually using, I think it's called Silicon Power. I don't remember the name of it exactly, but I will put a picture of it and a link of it in the description below. I would definitely recommend using CFast cards if you can afford it. But if you can't, like the T5 is like pretty cool. The one thing I don't like about it is that you just have to find a place to put it. Okay, let's talk codecs, because this camera records in 2 different codecs. It can record in Blackmagic RAW or it can record in ProRes. My experience with both is that they're both pretty great. Blackmagic RAW is definitely the winner of the 2 because you just have so much data. But the file size of Blackmagic RAW is insane. Even when you compress it to 8:1 or 12:1, it's still pretty massive. So you're gonna have to spend some money on some external hard drives. I bought an 18 terabyte and it's pretty close to being full now, so I'm not looking forward to buying a new one. But if you are gonna shoot in those codecs, please be sure to invest in some external hard drive space. Even in ProRes, I feel like this camera produces bigger than usual file sizes, even if I'm shooting in 1080p. Okay, let's talk about the ND filters. So I love the fact that this camera has ND filters. It's definitely helped me out a lot, you know, instead of having to put on like a variable ND filter or putting on a matte box and having a fixed ND filter. Just being able to press a button and have 2, 4, 6 stops of ND works really well. There are some situations where I wish that the ND filter was variable, so that I can adjust it to exactly where I want it to be. There are some times where like that sweet spot is like right in between 2 and 4 or 4 and 6, and I don't want to like sacrifice my f-stop because I want to get the exposure just right. But I love the fact that it has ND filters just built in and I could just press a button and it's just there. So I really love that about this camera. Let's talk about the screen actually. Considering the screen size that you get on other cameras, like most of them don't even come close. It's like so much real estate here. You can really frame your shots up. You can really pull focus with this. Like, it's really good. I do prefer a 7-inch screen. A lot of times I'll have my DaCinci C7 sitting on top of my top handle just to make sure that I'm really getting it right, because even though the 5-inch screen is good, I think 7 is better. But as far as like built-in screens, I think this is one of the best that I've worked with. So that's it as far as like features. So I kind of want to end the video by talking about overall just like my feelings on the camera, just kind of like as a filmmaker and as a cinematographer. I think this is a great camera. Like, I think that I made a great choice by choosing this camera. There are a lot of great features that you're getting with this camera. Even with its downfalls, I think it's an amazing camera. I am looking forward to upgrading like sometime soon. There are certain things that I wish I had on this camera. Like 1, the form factor. It's just, I wish it was smaller. 2, I wish it had variable ND instead of fixed ND. 3, I wish it had global shutter instead of rolling shutter. I didn't talk about that, but yeah. And also the dynamic range. I wish that it was a bit different or that it worked a bit differently. As long as you keep a mental note of like where your highlights are sitting and where your shadows are sitting when you're shooting, and you kind of lock it in, I think it works out really well. Other than those few scenarios I talked about earlier where it might get a little weird. Yeah, overall, I think it was a great purchase. I've enjoyed shooting with this camera for the past year, learning its quirks, like just being able to get like such amazing footage. Like there are some shots that I've gotten with this camera that I am just in awe of, you know, it's just really dope. I definitely recommend this camera if you're getting into filmmaking, more serious filmmaking. If you're just doing video, like videography, I don't think this camera will work best for you. But if you are looking to do more cinematic stuff or more filmmaker stuff, then I think this is a really great camera. Thank you guys for checking out this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you have the 6K Pro, what you enjoy about it, or if you're thinking about getting it. I hope this video helped you make a decision. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I will see you guys on the next one.